Hello and welcome to this episode of Focus On. I'm Kenneth Igbomo, coming to you live from Davos in Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, where global leaders from the public and private sectors are gathered here to chart a way for the future of the world. If you know, the World Economic Forum is about improving the state of the world, and this year they're going to be looking at that through the lens of rebuilding trust. We know the world has been through quite a lot in the past 4-5 years, but then they're going to be looking at this from 4 key tangents. First is achieving security and cooperation in a fractured world. They will also be looking at how countries can achieve growth and create new jobs in the new era. Then we also see what's going to play out with artificial intelligence and how that can help countries achieve growth in their economies, and also finding long-term solutions to the challenges of climate change are also some of the topics that are going to be explored here. But more importantly, here at the World Economic Forum is that countries are using this platform to sell themselves as an investment destination. And let's find out what Team South Africa is up to at Davos.
Let's start off with the agenda of this year's WEF, being rebuilding trust. As Naspers, a global company, how do you see that taking place? Or rather, what do you see the point of intervention being in rebuilding trust?
I think rebuilding trust is an important concept, Fifi. And I think if I look at South Africa as an example, looking at the importance of trust and collaboration between business and government is something that has been key. And, if you look at just what happened with the Business United South Africa, where you had a number of listed companies that came together, and we all have joined together in working towards providing a proper support to the government. That's something that's really been important to us, and through that we're engaging, working with government in various areas, be it crime, be it in looking at logistics, be it in the energy sector, in the energy side, where a lot of work is actually being done, and as you know, the private sector is now able to actually be active. So building collaboration and trust in this particular issue is something that's important. And I think in the whole world now, looking at the issues that are faced with the warfares that we've seen in Russia and what we now see happening in the Middle East is something that's really, really important to ensure that we have trust among sovereigns as well as together among sovereigns and business as well.
And I think that's a great example that you use, just given the fact that South Africa has a template, or is trying out a template right now in how to get business and government to work together in partnering in some of the areas of weakness, from the energy to the security and also crime. But I'd like to ask perhaps a unfair but a necessary question, because it speaks to improvement. And on a scale or out of a score of 1 to 5, how would you rank the level of trust between government and business in South Africa right now? And whatever that number is, it will speak to what you would say needs to be done to improve the level of trust.
I think if you didn't have a significant level of trust between business and government, you wouldn't have had the type of turnout that you've had. We have had over 100 companies coming together and saying that they want to collaborate and work with government in improving the lives of South Africans. And so it's something that's important for every business operating in South Africa to ensure that we have the right logistics for moving goods, that we have safety for people. And so this is something that's important. And from our perspective, we've been focusing on digital skilling as well. So all of these things are important to improve and to create a better environment for South Africa. When you look at the whole African continent, there has been so much of a change, particularly through mobile telephony. And so from that perspective, we know that today we have, a number of goods and services that are available on mobile telephony. People in rural areas, people in urban areas have access to products through mobile telephony. And all of that happens when you have private sector and government being able to work together. Because in the case of South Africa, had it not been for ensuring that we have access to better, access to broadband, we wouldn't have been able to have products that have been developed by the private sector. And so, all of this is important. We need to ensure that we have better partnerships between government and private sector. And I'm very comfortable that in South Africa, we have that going very well at the moment. And thankfully so, because when you look at South Africa, we really do need that.
So that sounds like a 3 or 3.5.
Yeah, I was going
Yeah.
to say, is that 6? Is that 10 out of 10?
Sounds definitely above average.
Yeah, it's definitely above average.
It is above average. I think let's perhaps take that conversation from South Africa, that trust being rebuilt, to your attendance here and some of the sessions that you are attending. I'm curious to know what a company like Naspers, when it comes to a gathering like this, looks for, and what sessions you are attending.
There's a number of sessions that we're attending, and it's both looking at governments from a regulatory perspective, and then also looking at what various companies are looking at. And so, there's a number of developments that we have seen in AI. And so listening to what other companies are doing and relating that to what our AI teams within our group are doing. And there's been a lot of developments there too. So, I think in this period of time where there's so much change that is underway, where we're waiting for the next wave of what will be the next new product that's going to drive the global agenda in the digital sector, is something that is important to us. So, yeah.
So with governments, what are you doing? You setting up meetings? You are, I'd love to be a wall on the wall if you are, a fly on the wall. So what sort of discussions do you have?
So with governments, it's a variety of discussions, but it's all within our sector.
Right.
Looking at ways of ensuring, firstly, that we can have more accessibility of internet usage in South Africa. And South Africa already has a very high internet usage.
True.
But also ensuring that there's more a capability for businesses to be able to effect and bring on the products that they can bring onto the South African shores. And all of these things are only possible when you have a good relationship with government as well.
So I was speaking to a few people, and they said today one of the highlights was the presentation, the speech by the Premier of China.
Yes.
And I use China just given the fact that Naspers has got relationships with quite a number of global partners. And we've been talking about trust from an African perspective right now, but of course the conversation extends to the rest of the world. In terms of those partnerships with the rest of the world, what do you reckon is lacking to maybe further cement collaboration as it stands right now?
I think there's a lot more that's required in terms of particularly just looking specifically at trust and collaboration. Because when you look at some of the significant issues that are impacting the world right now, these are issues that potentially could be dealt with better if there was better engagement, better collaboration amongst nations, amongst sovereign states. And so there is a lot more that's required with respect to better communication amongst the different sovereigns. I think what you find is that there are particular positions that have been taken, with sovereigns working together. But from a business perspective, we would like to have the freedom to be able to engage and work across the globe. And I think for those of us particularly who are operating on the internet, the more freedom of movement you have, the better. And the better also for consumers around the world.
And that was Futi Mahanyele-Dabengwa. She's the CEO of Naspers. If countries are going to put out their messaging out there at WEF, the private sector plays a critical role in driving that message. And let's find out what the South African breweries has to say here in Davos, because they have a strong partnership with Brand South Africa, and we'll find out how they're helping to put South Africa's message out here in WEF.
Zoleka, thanks so much for your time. So actually just reflecting on your scarf, proudly bearing the South African colours. Let's just reflect on that and brand South Africa's message at WEF and the role that SAB has in spreading that message also.
We are a proudly South African company, so it's only natural that we are here really flaunting the South African flag. And I think it's important to support Brand SA in a few important messages on where our country is at. Number one, South Africa still remains very open for business. It's important that the global community knows that. I think secondly, to drive investor confidence, we also have to be transparent on the status of some of the structural reforms that we are implementing in the country. And then I'd say thirdly is to tell the AFCFTA story. the continent is alive with possibility as well, in that we are playing a very leading role in driving that trade agreement and creating a very large trade area for the continent.
I mean, some of these structural challenges that you are referring to, we do know in South Africa's case, there's challenges with the energy situation, there's challenges with logistics and the ports. But what we have seen is possible solutions, particularly solutions that involve the private sector, so such partnerships. Many say that private and public sector partnerships are absolutely critical in drawing investments into the country and also enabling it to grow. Just your view as SAB on PPPs and the possible or potential role you envision yourselves playing.
In a time of polycrisis, you need multi-solving, and multi-solving requires the entire ecosystem. And it's not only just always private sector and government. It could be academia involved, communities. And if you look at the nature of challenges that are facing not only South Africa, but I'd say the global community at large, inequality, poverty, climate change, we need all minds at the table and all hands on deck. And as private sector, I think we've got resources, we've got capabilities, we've got scale. I'm part of a global multinational that can really be a part of the solution. So I think that's a very important role we can play. So big role in terms of PPPs for private sector.
You mentioned that South Africa is open for business, but in terms of practicality, what does that openness look like on the ground in SAB's view?
In our world, we've been able to invest in the last 2 years just over $680 million. And that openness means that we drive job creation on the job. We've got a very extensive value chain. The beer value chain supports in excess of 250,000 livelihoods. If you look at South Africa, 1 in every 66 jobs is a beer job. And having a conducive business environment and an open business environment allows us as private sector to create much needed jobs in our country.
Lastly, I mean, we are still early days into this year's WEF. Still a lot more conversations to take place. But to give us a broad understanding of what SAB's expectations of WEF are, essentially what you're hoping to take home.
Sure, a lot. Rebuilding trust is the theme. Hoping to learn, hoping to engage. We're going to talk a lot around the beer economy. We're going to host a South African night with South African beers. And I think ultimately to take all of that knowledge home and do a bit better. If you know more, you can do more.
And that was Zole Kalisa. She's the Vice President for Corporate Affairs at the South African Breweries. And brings us to the end of this episode of Focus On. We're still here in Davos. We'll bring you more conversations from the forum.